Hey everybody, welcome back to the world's longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth. As always, I'm the GM or Game Master, and with me today is my husband,
Hey, everybody.
and we will be talking about Sailor Moon. So let's see, we met, and started dating 20 years ago.
22.
Uh, gonna
This
gonna
month.
date myself.
This month is
Uh,
22 years ago, yeah.
yep, it'll be 22 years. Um, we had a lot in common. And of course, in the earlier stages of dating, you try to get the other person involved in your hobbies. Mine at the time, and for quite a while, had been the Sailor Moon dubbed version that had been released in America. Uh, it is just, I'd seen it when I was probably about 13, and it stuck with me. So after my husband introduced me to Transformers, and I absolutely love it to this day, I tried to introduce him to Sailor Moon through our shared passion of role playing games. So we bought the Sailor Moon role playing game, and I ran a game which only included the five girls that were in the first couple seasons of the show that was released in the United States. So there was Sailor Moon, Sailor Venus, Sailor Mercury, Sailor Mars, and Sailor Jupiter. And of course, Tuxedo Mask.
And it was she ran it. I remember at the time we were playing a lot of that beach volleyball game.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the DOA,
yeah,
the
Dead or
dating
Alive Beach
simulator,
Volleyball.
basically. Yeah.
And that game was kind of a dating simulator where you would
Mhm.
get to know all of the DOA girls and everybody had their ups and downs. And then the player had to kind of figure out, who was their favorite. That was kind of the point. So so that's how you ran Sailor Moon. And then I
Yep.
was an original character. I played Powerhouse and they were all the same age. Um and yeah, I remember at the end of the day I felt like Jupiter had the least downsides. I remember thinking that Jupiter acted a lot like kind of in a way like a 50s housewife where
Yeah.
she was sort of like cooking for my character and doing the laundry and stuff like that. And then some of the other characters like Sailor Mars, you ran her to be kind of a punk. She had an attitude problem.
I did not like her. She was in the show. For anybody who doesn't know, Sailor Mars always wanted to be with Tuxedo Mask. Even after it was revealed that Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask had to marry in order to create this perfect utopia, she was still going after him, and that just drove me nuts. So I may have been a little biased when I was running the game and made her probably uh, have a bigger attitude than she should have, but oh well.
I would be very curious. I have no idea who made Sailor Moon. I'm not that knowledgeable about it. But it's kind of like, now we have My Hero Academia,
Yes.
and the guy who made that has said he was a big fan of American comic books, right? I actually always wondered if this whoever made Sailor Moon, if they liked X-Men, because I see a lot of parallels actually between Tuxedo Mask and Sailor Moon and Cyclops and Jean Grey,
So
where
I'm gonna butcher this. It was created by uh, Takeuchi Naoko, uh,
okay,
and was a very popular manga series and won several awards. for her series before it was made into the cartoon.
Well, yeah, for me, the timeline there is about right
Yeah.
for when they were doing stuff for it would have been a couple years after certain X-Men stories because X-Men hit really big in the 80s, and then Sailor Moon kind of hit really big in the 90s.
Hmm.
But I was just gonna say in both cases, because whether you want to think about like Cable from Marvel or the second Phoenix, Rachel Summers,
Hmm.
you still have this idea that there's a kid in the future who comes back in time and is related to these other characters.
Yeah.
I know some fans are going to correct me and say it's not Jean, it's her clone Madeline Pryor, but bear with me. But yeah, they did on Sailor Moon then too, where there's kind of another Sailor Moon from the future, but she has pink hair and she goes back in time. And then I thought where Sailor Mars comes in and she has kind of like a bad attitude and she's wanting to be that like the love triangle thing, then to
Yeah.
me she was the Wolverine. How Wolverine wants
Yeah,
to
I
get
can
with
see
Jean
that.
Grey. Yeah. But yeah,
Um,
so no, it was a good game. I was never a Sailor Moon fan before that. I didn't know the characters. I didn't have any preferences or anything. Um and yeah, I Sailor Jupiter for me was the standout character of the whole game. That she seemed just very, very nice. And something else I liked about her was you ran her kind of like an underdog,
yeah.
where like sometimes in certain fiction you'll get a girl who's maybe like heavy set and then she has like low self-esteem because of how like heavy she is or something like I don't know. The movie
Yeah.
Shallow Hal comes to mind. Um but then she's a very nice person almost as like
Yes.
the counterbalance to it or whatever you want to call. Um, so I felt like Sailor Jupiter was that way, where she thought she was too tall or something, and she
Yes.
felt like she was not girly enough or whatever.
Hmm.
But then I thought the counterbalance to that then was she was really the nicest of them all. And
Yeah.
then a lot of them, I think, are like very high energy and very immature. And then I thought she was actually the most low energy, which like when it comes to fiction, that's what I gravitate towards
Yeah.
is I'm very much like calm down, like you're on my nerves. Like I can't watch The Fifth Element because I despise the one character, Ruby Rod or whatever the heck his name is. He's just too dang high energy, right? It just grates
Yeah.
on my last nerve. And but no, yeah, she was really cool. And so actually, yeah, 22 years later, if I'm online and I see, whatever people doing fan art or something, and I see a picture of Sailor Jupiter to this day, I react positively. I'm like, oh, Sailor Jupiter, and I go about my day or
Hmm.
whatever. I like seeing her.
Yeah.
It-
She's arguably my favorite of the original cast. 'Cause yeah, she was awkward. She did feel like she was out of place. She was tall. She was a tomboy. She was good at sports. But on the flip side, she was also the mother hen, the cook, the the person who was, looking out for everybody. And I just felt like, if I had to be one of the Sailor Scouts, I would want to be Jupiter. Um, because yeah, she was just the nicest. So I leaned into that a bit. I may have railroaded you slightly.
it's funny. I just Googled it. She's 5'6". It's the other characters are all like 5'2" or something, and she's 5'6". And
That's
then
funny.
yeah, and so I think one of the it kind of played into the story then was because Powerhouse is 6'4".
Yeah.
So I think she liked that she felt small next to him,
Yeah, yeah.
you
And I
know?
think that would bring out her feminine side.
Yeah, that was something I thought was funny, and you ran it that way, and then we would watch the show together,
Hmm.
and you'd run a little, and we'd watch a little and run, all that. And I did notice that she acts like she's not girly enough on the show. Like you weren't just making stuff up.
Yeah,
You're right. And it's weird to me that she is that way. I really don't get why she's that way.
I don't know, especially when you look at their lives outside of being Sailor Scouts. She was the most domestic. Um, so like when she did find someone on the show that she had a crush on, she would bake something for them.
Yeah.
Um, she would show, hey, look, I'm wife material. Um, you, you might not note that just looking at me, but I'm really great wife material.
No,
Uh,
I thought
so
it came through. I thought it was interesting too. She's the only one with her like own apartment.
yeah, because she had been transferred away from her home uh, to where everybody else lived, and that's why her school uniform also looked so much more different than everybody else's. Is because she went to a different school. Um,
Everybody else has blue, right? No, Sailor
yeah,
Mars doesn't.
yeah,
So she's only got red. Yeah. I think the other three though have blue skirts, right?
yeah, and but like they were in the same style, and whereas Sailor Jupiter's was brown and it had a longer skirt, and she had lacing up around the collar of her shirt, which the other girls didn't have. They had
Yeah.
buttons or, a brooch or whatever they wanted there.
Right.
Um, so like they really went out of their way to make her the outlier of the group until the battles, and then she absolutely kicked butt.
And we should probably talk about some of the others. I remember Sailor Mercury was the nerd,
Yeah.
and
She
she
was
had
the
the
least
short.
interested in romance.
Yeah, she kind of like if the other characters, like I mentioned earlier, kind of put me in mind of the X-Men. Mercury, in a way, reminds me of like a Spock
Yeah.
or something, or an Egon. And so she was kind of aloof, and I feel like she kind of didn't really care if my character was around or not,
Yeah. It
in a
it
way.
wasn't yeah, it wasn't really in her character to be romantic. Um, it was made clear from the get-go that she wanted to grow up and be a doctor.
Yeah.
She came from a family of geniuses. She was a genius. Like that was her drive was intelligence. That was what made her work as a part of the team. Was she was the smart one. She was the one who
And
could, solve complex problems and
right.
whatnot.
And then there was Venus, the other blonde, and I my memory of her was she just seemed kind of a little shallow.
Yeah,
Like I felt like she was pretty and she knew she was pretty and therefore she didn't really need to have a personality, kind of.
yeah, yeah,
And and so it's like it wasn't like because I outright thought Mars, which was the black-haired one, I thought she was like mean.
yes.
I'll refrain from using the B word, but I just thought she was mean. And so like, yeah, I for sure hated Mars the most. And then I think Mercury was probably my second least favorite because she just didn't care if you were there. And then Venus might have been the middle ground one for me because she was just so neutral,
Yes.
you know. And then, like we said, I liked Jupiter the most because she had all the positive attributes. And then Sailor Moon herself, which I can't remember now if we were toying around with like, well, screw it, it's a different dimension. Maybe she doesn't end up with tuxedo mask. I can't remember now if that's what we were doing or not. But
Um,
I remember watching the show with you and it drove me nuts because the voice actress would basically have two different voices for her depending on this situation.
yes.
And so she had like serious moments and she would use like a really attractive voice and she'd be really serious and like
Hmm.
that was the side of Sailor Moon I liked. But then they would do like these comedy moments and she did like a really weird thing with her voice.
Yeah, it was a real grating, high-pitched sound.
It always put me in mind of like a seal,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
seal barking.
yeah.
And like I just couldn't deal with that, man. I just, you know. So
I
I
did, I, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I had a love-hate thing with Sailor Moon herself.
I didn't want her to be the main focus, because in the game I was running, I did want her to marry Tuxedo Mask and create Crystal Tokyo.
Okay.
Um, so that's why I kind of shied away from putting more effort into her character, than I did the others, was because for me, from the game master standpoint, she wasn't on the table.
Okay.
She wasn't an option.
I guess from where I was at as the player, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of a peek behind the curtain. She wasn't on the table. If you had tried to go for her, I would have stonewalled.
You would have what?
I would have stonewalled you.
Oh,
I wouldn't have let
that's
it
fair.
happen.
That's fair. I'm trying to think of anything else
But
about that campaign. We played that for a while. We played that for maybe like 6 months.
yeah, yeah, because I went through and all my favorite villains. I made sure that we played. Uh, you know, I don't want to say that we played the episode. I started each game off like the episode. So I set up the premise of, okay, here's the villain, here's what they're after,
Right.
go.
Right.
Um, so they were always vastly different, of course, with your character involved than what would happen in the show, but we would still, the bad guys would lose and good guys would win, and yay, love triumphs overall.
Well,
So I think we did.
I thought it was
Go
kind of
ahead.
neat too that yeah, like Sailor Moon has a certain vibe that's hard for me to relate to. And I feel like they have a lot of moments in Sailor Moon where the girls will all like hold hands and they'll say something like, well, we believe in the power of friendship. And if it's like a plant monster, it will wilt or something. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of how
Yeah,
it works in Sailor Moon. And then the way it worked for us was really more of a traditional I fly over to the plant monster, I fire energy blast, this is how many APs of energy blast I have. What is the plant monster's dexterity? We were
yeah,
really changing how Sailor Moon worked actually.
yes.
And I thought
Yeah.
that was cool. And then I remember at one point, because then Powerhouse and Jupiter were boyfriend and girlfriend at the end.
Hmm.
And then Jupiter was like doing stuff in a more Western setting then, but
Yeah.
using these Sailor Moon attacks. And it's like a sentinel. Well, I believe in the power of love. So the Sentinel takes 15 points of damage or something, you know,
Yeah.
weird
Um,
Sailor Moon physics.
One thing I would like to mention before I wrap it up is something that I enjoyed was, um, because we weren't so much focused on a specific story, I was able to give the villains substance. So, like, if it was, a hot lady villain, that might get Powerhouse's attention, and he could talk her into being a good girl. Like, I wanted to make sure that she had a personality beyond just like, oh, I'm, here to steal the thingamajigger for this week's adventure.
Right.
Um, so I did enjoy that. It gave me a challenge as a story writer and an artist to create personalities from, something that was very shallow and not deep to start with. So
I hear you. Yeah. It was a good game.
yeah, I'm I'm happy that you enjoyed it and still think about it today,
Oh, I
22
did.
years later.
22 years later, I think about that game.
Oh,
Something I wanted to say, by the way, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong. I don't think we had the Sailor Moon RPG yet. I think we were,
no,
yeah, I think we got that a couple years after we were married because you were running this when we were just dating.
yeah,
And I remember right before you ran that, we had a really good friend named Dave Eckelberger, who sadly is not with us
yeah,
anymore. And Dave had a game that he just called Dave's Diceless Game.
yep,
And there are a handful of diceless role-playing games out there, and our group had never really heard of that before Dave. And Dave was more familiar with like Slug and Fudge and stuff like that. And so
mhm,
I think that was actually more what we were doing at first
yeah,
was I think this was more diceless because even though we've mentioned combat some, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong, I feel like this campaign was like 1% combat and like 99% characterization.
yes, you
And
are correct. We did
yeah,
focus on characterization a lot because, as a player, that's something that's my favorite part. I don't I don't want to play in a game where it's you walk into the tavern and you're having, a drink and some guy walks in and says orcs are attacking, you know,
yeah, I hate that.
there you go. Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want substance, I want to have a campaign and enjoy, the development of my character from what I had originally conceived to what this person becomes through the course of the story. Love that.
I do like for instance, when I was in high school, I've been doing a lot of videos recently, where I've been thinking about Jay, who was my old game
Yeah.
master in high school. And Jay, one of the things that would happen a lot is this is gonna sound out of left field, but I'll bring it back. It would be like a Friday night, and like we'd go see a movie, and we'd be hanging out at the mall, at the arcade, and we'd go to Burger King or whatever, and we'd go back to Jay's house afterwards. Like everybody, the whole gang would be at Jay's house. And we go, "Hey Jay, run us a game." And he'd be like, "I don't have one ready." And I remember our standard thing, because we were just so into that old X-Men cartoon from the 90s, and that pilot
Hmm.
episode, I think it's called Night of the Sentinels. He
Yeah.
had basically ran that one time where like a sentinel attacked the mall, and we were like, "Yeah, just do that. We just want to fight a sentinel at the mall." Like it's just like it was there is no plot basically at that point. We knew exactly what was going to happen. We are just going to keep beating on the thing until it didn't run anymore, you know? But what I liked about those Sentinel the mall games, because I feel like to an outsider that would sound like really pointless maybe, it was the
Hmm.
characterization. It was that while we were beating on the Sentinel, like if someone screwed up and got a bad roll of the dice, um, we would make fun of that guy or whatever, like
Yeah.
in character. And so I could see some parallels between that and this,
Yes.
where even when there is the combat or whatever, that's not really the point. And the characterization is always the point. That's something I feel about
Yeah.
when I'm making videos. I feel like I'm not really doing a good job of getting that across.
Oh, I
Um,
think you do a great job though as a game master of giving us the ability to, you know, do that in game. You give us time. Like you purposely are like, okay, so what are you guys doing? Um, you let us develop our characters and encourage their growth throughout the campaigns that you run for us.
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, can you think of anything else to say about Sailor Moon? We got 6 minutes left before the timer shuts off automatically. I feel like we kind of got most of it across.
Yeah.
I guess I was just going to say, you mentioned the thing there at the end. We will often play a game that lasts all day Saturday. That is not
Hmm.
uncommon for us, you know. And then, you know, Saturday night, I will go to make a video about whatever it is that we did, and the video will be 5 minutes long. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the bummer is sadly the videos aren't really doing justice what's really happening on game day.
Yeah. No, there's
And
so
like,
much that happens.
and yeah, I didn't know how to do this video without just saying Powerhouse went to Japan and met the Sailor Scouts and had to decide which one he liked the most, and it was Jupiter, the end. You know, and it really, yeah, you could describe it that way, but you know, you could describe the entire Lord of the Rings saga as like, yeah, they threw a ring in a volcano,
Yeah.
and you
Yep.
know, it's kind of that way. But no,
Uh,
The Sailor Moon game was really, really good.
thank you. I coming from you, that means a lot to me because you're my favorite GM ever. I mean, I married you, so I must have liked the game. Um, but if you don't have anything else to add, question mark,
You know, if I think of anything, I can throw it in the comments section.
which
Um,
reminds me,
yeah.
uh, thank you everybody for joining us as we reminisced about this game. If you could be so kind as to drop us a like, check to make sure you're still subscribed, subscribe if you're not, and leave us a comment because we really enjoy hearing things from your perspective. We enjoy reading your comments and replying to them. And sometimes they even have ripple effects and affect how we play our next game.
Yep.
So
So,
from
okay, go ahead.
from all of us here at the world's longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, thank you for being with us. We hope you have a wonderful day.
And we'll see you in the next adventure.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.